LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the December 8th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing here. Tonight I picked out the weekend's 11 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. I have 11 clips, like I said, so down in the video description you can get a copy of my clip list, follow along on my cryptic notes if you want, because impeachment is again the topic. Impeach Trump, impeach him, that's the topic, I guess. And this is probably the second to last Sunday, I think, that you'll be able to order one of these Impeach Trump t-shirts from me if you want. You can do it by becoming a $15 patron on Patreon. I think it's like $24 at the join button on YouTube, or if you're in the United States, you can just give me a $15 direct contribution through PayPal and tell me if you want an extra large, large, or medium while supplies last. I'm especially running out of extra large and medium. I have a whole bunch of larges left. But there's this Sunday and then next Sunday, and impeachment's going to happen, they say, by Christmas. That'll be something that you'll see in the news clips I'm going to show you in a minute. I've actually promised my leftover shirts to an organizer for Indivisible for a rally they're going to hold when impeachment comes up for a vote in the House of Representatives. And so I'll probably, however many are left, I'm going to give to Indivisible, and they're going to give them away at their rally for donations. And so if you want one this Sunday, next Sunday are probably your last chances to get one of these great Impeach Trump t-shirts and show your support for the impeachment, because it looks like impeachment articles will be voted out of the House Judiciary Committee this week, and the full House will vote before Christmas, like I said, and after. And this week, the House Judiciary Committee heard from constitutional scholars on impeachment. Also, all the signs are pointing to President Trump getting impeached because, of course, of the evidence that he had this scheme to pressure the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy to dig up this, well, to announce that he was investigating Biden and his son Hunter, Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden, and to investigate this weird 2016 Crowdstrike conspiracy theory that it was really the Ukrainians who hacked the DNC server. And you'll see a lot of Republicans refer to that, with the shorthand 2016. He wanted to investigate 2016, but don't forget what he wanted to investigate was this weird CrowdStrike conspiracy theory, and that will also come up in some of the news clips I'm going to show you. But I want to start off with the political comedy for the week, and the topic of the political comedy actually would be a big scandal for most presidents, and it got very little coverage on the Sunday morning news analysis shows. But it was the subject of the cold open on Saturday Night Live, the very beginning of the show, where Trump got basically laughed out of Europe by our NATO allies. That's the big scandal. And so Saturday Night Live kind of reimagined it as, Trump got treated the way people get treated in high school. And so they imagined this high school cafeteria where they had Jimmy Fallon as Justin Trudeau of Canada, and Paul Rudd was Emmanuel Macron of France, and James Corden was Boris Johnson of the UK, and they were the cool kids who were kind of taunting Trump. And you'll see Kate McKinnon, of course, Donald Trump is played by Alec Baldwin, and Kate McKinnon plays Angela Merkel in I wanted to show you part of it. You can see, of course, the whole clip for free on the Saturday Night Live website on YouTube. It'll link down in the video description, but I will talk about that clip with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
So should I sit with you guys now because this seat is still not taken?
No, actually this is for someone else. Angela!
Yeah. Angela! We saved you a seat, eh?
Is this happening?
Am I actually about to sit at the cool kids table? Okay, wow. Just relax, Angela. Should I bring my flugelhorn? No, I must leave this behind. I must leave it all behind because I am cool now. And maybe one strudel. Okay. Hey. What's up, my dude? Sorry, Donald, you're schnoogin', you're lugan. Hello, fellow cool kids. So, soybean terrace, am I right? Yes.
Hey, Angela, you know who might be coming to our party? Obama.
Barack!
Yes, you like him, no?
What? No. Obama, ew, he's like gross. I definitely didn't draw his face on my body pillow or anything.
Donald, I heard someone likes you too.
Really, who?
Putin.
Quick, Boris, do the sign. Yes, well, you better get back to Latvia now.
Oh, okay. I'll see you guys later at the party, okay?
Yeah, totally. It's under the London Bridge.
And so, yeah, that was, if you want to see the whole Saturday Night Live cold open, that was just a minute and 40 seconds of it. The whole thing's down at a link in the video description. There are several other good jokes, and actually, Saturday Night Live had some good jokes last night, but not much coverage of impeachment. That was the only coverage of impeachment in the cold open, the impeach me sign on Trump's back, which that's kind of funny in the high school scenario that they created there. And I guess I almost took the title of the video, Impeach Him, from that this week. And sorry, I just dropped my clip list. Even in Weekend Update, which I decided not to take a clip from Weekend Update because they did very little coverage of impeachment there. They covered some other ridiculous things that happened in the news. I don't know. It's almost like the news of impeachment kind of has been in a little bit of a lull since the House Intelligence Committee had those hearings that revealed all the evidence that Trump had engaged in this quid pro quo scheme. And I don't know, it almost, the biggest news was in September when Trump released the transcript of the July 25th phone call he had with Volodymyr Zelenskiy, where Zelensky mentioned military aid. That was one of the things I saw Republicans saying, well, he never mentioned military aid, and I mean, Trump never mentioned military aid, but Zelensky mentioned getting the javelins. And then Trump says, I want you to do us a favor, though. Our country's been through a lot, 2016. And then he talks about the Crowdstrike conspiracy theory, which, remember, is totally debunked. It's saying that Ukraine hacked the DNC server, not Russia, which is not what all the intelligence agencies say, to the extent you can trust all the U.S. intelligence agencies. And then later in the conversation, he also asks about investigating the Bidens. Never says the word corruption in either of his two phone calls with Volodymyr Zelenskiy, and you'll see Republicans also talking about that in some of the news clips I'm going to get to. And I'm going to start with the news summary. NBC News Meet the Press. Well, not even much of a competition this week. I'll show you ABC and CNN afterwards, both very brief, but this is almost 4 minutes long. You'll see Chuck Todd here talking. I mean, he's like all sorts of flowery language. Constant storms breaking of norms. Constant storms breaking of norms. It's almost a poem. It's a Chuck Todd poem, maybe. And the Pelosi announcement that they're going forward with articles of impeachment, and basically Trump's going to be impeached, but we don't have the details yet. And then it goes to the package where we actually kind of get some reporting on the details, which I will talk about with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Good Sunday morning. Given the constant storm of controversy and disruption that has defined the norm-breaking Trump presidency, it's easy to forget what a historic moment we've all just experienced. With Speaker Nancy Pelosi's announcement this week, it has become all but certain that Donald Trump will become just the third American president in history to be impeached. That much we know, or think we do anyway. At the same time, there is so much we don't know. We don't know how many articles of impeachment the Democrats will draw up against President Trump, or what they will cover. We don't know what a Senate trial would even look like. Remember, we expected Senate hearings, at least, for a Supreme Court nominee named Merrick Garland. and those never happen. We don't know whether Senate Republicans will be able to muster 51-vote majorities at key moments as the trial progresses, if it does happen. And we don't know the extent of the federal investigation into Rudy Giuliani's activities or how close it could get to the president himself. Most important with impeachment, a possible government shutdown, a looming primary and caucus season, followed by a full-on brutal presidential campaign, all in a deeply divided country. We don't know how well the country can handle the stress test we're all about to face.
I am asking our chairman to proceed with articles of impeachment.
After her historic announcement on impeachment, a murky road ahead.
I'm not here to talk about that.
Nobody knows what's going on.
I haven't answered your question because there is no answer at this point.
On Wednesday, Senator McConnell released the 2020 Senate schedule, with January missing, a dramatic nod to a possible impeachment trial.
The only thing I know for sure is that nobody knows what we're doing in January yet.
In the House, Democrats are still debating the scope of the impeachment charges.
With all due respect, I'm not going to answer one charge. We're not writing the articles of impeachment here tonight.
There is broad support among Democrats for articles that address the core of the president's conduct on Ukraine, but a divide over how broad an additional obstruction charge should be, and reluctance by many moderate members to expand the scope to conduct detailed in the Mueller report.
What do you think about adding Mueller evidence to potential obstruction of justice charge?
Here's what I would say to that. I was against going through with impeachment previous to this Ukraine matter.
I think we need to stay focused on Ukraine.
Well, we do expect to lose some, and that's why I say it is a conscious vote.
For months, the president and his allies have complained that Mr. Trump deserves legal representation in the inquiry.
We don't have rights to lawyers, not giving us lawyers.
Does it let us have lawyers?
We had no representation.
But on Friday, White House counsel Pat Cipollone made it clear the president will not mount a defense in the House or even send lawyers to the Judiciary Committee's hearing on Monday.
Well, I don't know. I know this, that the impeachment thing is a total hoax.
Another unknown, the length and scope of any Senate trial. The White House has signaled that if there is a trial, the president wants to deflect attention from his conduct to a wish list of Democratic witnesses.
Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Adam Schiff, and the whistleblower.
The whistleblower, Adam Schiff, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden.
Witnesses like the whistleblower, like Adam Schiff, like Hunter and Joe Biden.
In the end, though,
you got to get 51 votes. So at what point does 51 people say, I've heard enough, I'm ready to vote? So who knows?
Senate Republicans will need the support of several of their own who have been willing to break with the president in the past, and of Republicans up for re-election in competitive races. Perhaps not helpful in winning over Senate Republicans who are on the fence, the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who is at the center of the scandal, spent this week in Ukraine.
Well, I just know he came back from someplace and he's going to make a report, I think, to the Attorney General and to Congress. He says he has a lot of good information. I have not spoken to him about that information.
And joining me now is the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Democrat Jerry Nadler of New York. Chairman Nadler.
And I will have a couple Jerry Nadler clips, an Adam Schiff clip, a Zoe Lofgren clip, a Matt Gaetz clip, a Ted Cruz clip. Those will be the newsmaker clips coming up. A couple Democrats, a couple Republicans there. But I want to finish the news summaries. That was the long news summary. Though, did you notice, I don't think there was much mention of the constitutional scholars who testified on Wednesday about impeachable offenses. You know, the three that the Democrats called, who said that Trump had basically committed impeachable offenses, and then Jonathan Turley, who said, you're going too fast and we need more evidence, but that phone call was not good, and if you could prove the quid pro quo, then that would be an impeachable offense, even though, like, the Republican constitutional scholar Jonathan Turley said that. So that was not good, but you notice NBC didn't cover that. It's not really in the CNN State of the Union one either. It shows up in the ABC one I'm going to show in a minute, but both of these are really short. The CNN State of the Union, the State of the Union, Jake Tapper isn't the host. Dan Abash is in there, and the State of the Union this week is crossing a threshold because we're going to get impeachment articles this week, and almost certainly Trump is going to be the third president to be impeached. I've been saying that for about a month, that it's virtually certain about a month ago or so, it became very clear Trump is going to be impeached this year, this month, probably in the next couple weeks, and you'll see Dana Bash reporting that because we've crossed the threshold over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in for Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is crossing a threshold. Those are the words of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, whose team of top Democrats is working all weekend on articles of impeachment against President Trump. The first votes on those articles could come this week. It is now almost certain that Donald J. Trump will become the third U.S. president to be impeached by the House of Representatives. The president's legal team signaled it will not participate in the House process, which the president again yesterday called a continuation of a 3-year witch hunt. Instead, his team is looking ahead to a trial in the Republican-controlled Senate. But the action now is in the House, where lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are preparing. Yesterday, Democrats released a report outlining the historical arguments for impeachment, and this weekend they're holding mock hearings, getting ready to lay out their case tomorrow in what they're calling a public trial. That as some moderate Democrats are expressing concerns about the scope of impeachment, warning that expanding the focus could make them vulnerable in their home districts. Next, I'll talk to the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, but right away we are going to talk to Congressman Mark Meadows. Thank you so much for coming in.
So again, they didn't really talk about the constitutional scholars there, about Trump getting laughed out of Europe. That didn't get much coverage. You notice also at the end there, Dana Bash in the live version of CNN State of the Union, she seemed to think she was going to have Jerry Nadler first and then Mark Meadows second. But then there was some sort of technical difficulty. Well, when they did the rebroadcast 3 hours later, they actually did Jerry Nadler first and Mark Meadows second. I didn't take any clips of Mark Meadows, just whatever. I took the best clips that I thought that I could give the best commentary on and that I thought you would be most likely to want to comment on as I did the live broadcast. But anyway, I think I criticized the news summaries from both NBC and CNN for both not mentioning Trump getting laughed out of Europe and also not mentioning the constitutional scholars who said that Trump committed impeachable offenses. At least that latter issue is addressed in the shortest of the news summaries from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos is there this week, and this is just 34 seconds that I will talk about with you after we watch together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. The witnesses have been heard, the reports written, constitutional scholars have weighed in, the party lines harder by the week. And now that Nancy Pelosi has declared Democrats have no choice, there is no turning back. President Trump on track to become the third American president in history to be impeached, likely by Christmas. Next step, the House Judiciary Committee will draft, debate, and vote on articles of impeachment this week. They convened first thing Monday morning. And we're joined now by two members of that committee, Democrat Zoe Lofgren, Republican Matt Gaetz, and Congressman.
And I will have both Zoe Lofgren and Matt Gaetz in later clips. I think last week I called her Zoe Lofgren because her name is spelled Z-O-E. I thought it was Zoe, but apparently it's Zoe, and I got it wrong last week, so I apologize for that. There was no news summary really from Face the Nation. Margaret Brennan just summarized a couple things in 10 seconds and then went straight to the first guest. On Fox News Sunday, they did a whole news summary about national defense issues because they had been covering this whole national defense conference at the Reagan Library for days, and they did at least get Mark Esper, the defense secretary, as one of the guests. But in their news summary, they didn't cover impeachment at all. They talked about the shooting in Pensacola, and they talked about what's going on with North Korea, and that impeachment didn't come up. And even when they did a later brief news summary about the White House news, they talked about impeachment, but also about this report, the IG report, about whether the oranges of the investigation were when they started spying on Trump, of course, it's the origins of the FBI's investigation into Russian collusion and all that, whether it was justified or not. Well, apparently the IG is going to say that it was justified. There was some illegality amongst, cops and prosecutors, like faking stuff to get a warrant, which is like, oh, gee, as a former criminal defense attorney, does that happen like every day, everywhere, all over the United States? So, of course, they found that, but no high-ranking officials involved in any wrongdoing. And I'm not going to cover any of that, but that was the news summary from Fox News that I'm not going to show. But Chris Wallace did get into impeachment issues a little bit when he had Mark Esper on, and because, of course, one of the big issues in the Trump impeachment is whether Trump held up military aid to the Ukraine for his personal political reasons. And of course, Mark Esper, who became acting defense secretary in July, before the famous July 25th Trump-Zelenskiy call, the perfect call where he asked him to do us a favor, though. Mark Esper didn't answer any questions about that. Chris Wallace kind of asked, but he let him get away with, saying, well, I will talk about what Chris Wallace let him get away with and watch your commentary about it, because I don't think this is great cross-examination of Mark Esper, the defense secretary, when Chris Wallace questions him over here.
Finally, a couple of questions about impeachment. When we last talked a couple of months ago, you said you were going to do everything you could to comply with congressional subpoenas of records about the cutoff, the withholding of aid to Ukraine. But 2 days after our conversation, the Pentagon stonewalled Congress, didn't release a single document. Are you comfortable with that as Secretary of Defense?
Well, what my general counsel had come forward with is that there were legal and technical issues related to the request that we simply couldn't honor. So that was the reason behind that.
But do you feel Congress has a right to oversight and to be able to see documents from the Pentagon about a program that was approved by Congress?
Well, they do, but provided it's done the right and proper way, and I think that was the issue. Again, I think my reputation is pretty good in terms of being very transparent. I like to communicate with members of Congress, but in this case, there were, my recollection is that there were technical and legal issues that prohibited us from doing exactly what was requested by the Congress.
Finally, you were the Secretary of Defense this past summer when a lot of these actions were going down with regard to Ukraine. Did President Trump ever explain to you, tell you, why he was holding up U.S. military aid to Ukraine, an ally that was and is in a current war with Russia?
Well, look, I'm not going to get into that. There's obviously an inquiry underway on Capitol Hill. I came into this story, if you will, in late July is when I assumed office. At that time,
but you've been acting secretary earlier in July.
I had for a couple weeks, and then I was out of the game for a couple weeks while we waited for my confirmation process. I will tell you this much. When I came onto the scene, the three things we were looking at were this. One, was the aid necessary, vital to the Ukrainians in terms of defending against Russia? Number two, had the Ukrainians addressed corruption, and that was a congressional concern? And number three, were other countries in the region, other allies and partners, assisting them? And given those three things, we decided to support the provision of Ukrainian aid. At the end of the day, the bottom line is most of that aid got out on time, and at no time did it have any impact on United States national security.
And you were never told about any political considerations?
I'm not going to get into any of that. Again, there's a congressional inquiry underway, and I'll leave that process unto itself.
Mr. Secretary, thank you.
Thank
you so much for talking with us. You've got a lot on your plate defending this country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for doing so.
And I let it play there through the kiss up at the end there because, Mark Esper, up until July, I think, wasn't he like an executive? He worked for some defense contractor. Was it Boeing? Was it? I think it might have been Boeing, but I can't remember for sure. But I don't think Chris Wallace, he let him get it. Yeah, he asked a good question at the beginning, like, last time you were here, you said you were going to comply with all of Congress's requests, and then you stonewalled them and didn't give them anything. And there were technical and legal reasons, according to my general counsel. No real follow-up on what those technical and legal reasons might be. He just said, Congress didn't ask right. Sorry, I couldn't comply. And that seemed like it was there should have been a lot of follow-up on that one. And then Mark Esper apparently, or possibly, knows the answer to the question, did Trump delay aid? And, you know, he said that almost all the aid made it. Well, there was actually some aid that wasn't spent, from what I understand. Not a lot of it, just a very small amount. But all the aid didn't get to Ukraine, and it was definitely delayed. And he is someone who apparently, according to his answer, might know that Trump had a personal, partisan political reason for holding up that aid, but he won't answer that question because, well, that's the subject of an ongoing congressional inquiry. That's right, it's impeachment. It's impeachment. We're going to impeach Trump over that, and you may know the answer to the question, and you won't even say whether you know the answer to the question, and Chris Wallace doesn't really follow up on that and just says, thank you for defending our country. Well, thanks for nothing. That's what I say, thanks for nothing, but you can let me know what you think down in the comments section. I want to move on to the one Face the Nation clip I have. This is Adam Schiff, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, who I think did a really good job of... I seem to be upsetting Sandy over there. That was I don't know if you heard her shaking her collar there, which kind of distracted me, but lie down. But Adam Schiff, I think, did a good job of making the Republicans lie down and not interrupt the process of the House Intelligence Committee getting information from witnesses. And Jerry Nadler kind of followed his example a little bit. They not all these like parliamentary questions, and I mean there were a few more votes that had to be tabled in the House Judiciary Committee hearings, but Adam Schiff, I think, did a good job in the Intelligence Committee of not like recognizing people who were just trying to obstruct the process. And anyway, this is the one clip from Face the Nation where they didn't do a news summary, but at least they had Adam Schiff on to answer the question from Margaret Brennan about, asking what will the articles of impeachment be, and he doesn't answer. And then he says something that I find, I actually don't buy into. All Republicans are all saying Adam Schiff's a big liar, and that he lied about there being direct evidence of Russian collusion, which isn't true. I mean, the Trump Tower meeting was direct evidence of Russian collusion. It just didn't. There wasn't enough evidence to bring charges. That doesn't mean there wasn't direct evidence of Russian collusion. And then, of course, the whole Roger Stone thing. And anyway, I don't want to go all the way into that again, but I don't think Adam Schiff is a liar. But in this next clip, I don't really believe him. If what he's saying is true, as a former criminal defense attorney, what he's saying about prosecutors, he's the only prosecutor in the world who thinks this way, where you'll see he says that prosecutors just want to charge the charges where they have the most evidence. We don't like throw in a whole bunch of extra charges. Prosecutors, well, he says that was his prosecution philosophy, and I've never met any prosecutor when I was a criminal defense attorney who didn't throw in a whole bunch of extra charges that they could bargain away. But that's what Adam Schiff says, talking to Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation this morning in this clip.
Talking about that more with the National Security Advisor ahead on the program, but I want to switch to impeachment with you. There are already drafts of impeachment articles. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, has indicated that you could see abuse of power obstruction among them. What are you looking for? What should we expect these articles to be defined as?
Well, we have weighed in all the chairs with Chairman Nadler and his staff as to what we think would be appropriate in a set of articles. I can't go into those particular discussions, but I can tell you, as a former prosecutor, it's always been, my strategy in a charging decision, and an impeachment of the House is essentially a charging decision, to charge those that there is the strongest and most overwhelming evidence, and not try to charge everything, even though you could charge other things. So that's my guiding philosophy. There is overwhelming evidence that the president sought to coerce Ukraine into interfering in our election, essentially sought to cheat in our next election by getting a foreign government to weigh in. That is a very serious business, and it imperils our national security. It's a gross abuse of his office. And the president also deeply sought to obstruct the investigation into that wrongdoing. And I think that is the gravamen of the offense here.
Well, your committee will be presenting.
So that was the Adam Schiff clip, but I also have a couple Jerry Nadler clips with, I have a Ted Cruz in between the two Jerry Nadler clips. But I thought, like I said before I showed the clip, I don't believe Adam Schiff, or I have a bias against prosecutors. That's why I didn't really like Kamala Harris, why I'm not a fan of Amy Klobuchar, both former prosecutors. I talked about Kamala Harris being a cop, or that was an issue a couple months back, and now she's dropped out because she couldn't get enough support. And but prosecutors throw in so many extra charges where there's very weak evidence just so they can bargain them away. That was my experience as a criminal defense attorney years ago, and I don't think that practice has changed, except in the few jurisdictions where they've been able to elect more progressive prosecutors, like Philadelphia, and there are a couple other places. But I want to move on to, like I said, the Jerry Nadler clip is the next clip. This is Jerry Nadler talking to Chuck Todd on NBC News's Meet the Press, where it's funny, when he was on CNN State of the Union, he wouldn't say for sure that articles of impeachment would be voted out of the House Judiciary Committee this week. But over on Meet the Press, he like, without even being asked, you'll see it in the beginning of this clip, he volunteers that information, and then Chuck Todd follows up by asking about how many there are going to be, and he says he's not ready to say that exactly, but that there is overwhelming evidence that Trump should be impeached. And I will talk about that clip a little more with you after we watch it together over here.
Bring articles of impeachment presumably before the committee at some point later in the week.
Have you have an idea of how many articles you think we're going to draw, but you're not ready yet? You seem to be hesitant.
I'm not ready to decide that, and it's not just my decision, obviously.
Is this the speaker? Is this the speaker? You may come up with recommendations, and she ultimately says, "Do this, not that."
Well, she'll have a role, as may other members of the caucus, but the decisions have to be made based on everything we've learned until now, and based on what we hear tomorrow. But remember. Some of these things are very clear at this point. There is overwhelming evidence, uncontested by the Republicans, that the president put himself above the country, that the president sought foreign assistance in elections, sought to cover it up, completely defied participation in the congressional investigation in order to hide his role, that he sought foreign assistance for the next election.
What is that a definition of? Is that an abuse of power allegation that you're describing to me?
Well, there are several things.
Bribery allegation? What allegation are you describing there?
Well, it's certainly abuse of power. It might be abuse of obstruction of Congress and is not cooperating. You know, he refused every single document. He told everybody in the executive branch, do not cooperate, do not answer, do not testify. No president has ever done anything like that. So this is a defiance of the role of Congress given by the Constitution for impeachment. But again, he put himself above the country. He sought to get foreign interference against the integrity of our election. And this is a matter of urgency to deal with, because we have to make sure that the next election is conducted with integrity and without foreign interference.
During your hearing with the constitutional...
Oh, and you see there, at least Chuck Todd covered the constitutional scholar hearing when he talked to Jerry Nadler. I wanted to bring that up. But I thought Jerry Nadler did a good job there of explaining the overwhelming evidence that Trump committed impeachable offenses. And I want to contrast that with Ted Cruz's answer here to Chuck Todd. You'll see Chuck Todd asks Ted Cruz about the Crowdstrike conspiracy theory. He doesn't say that. He says, do you believe that Ukraine meddled in the 2016 election? And one of the reasons I started the clip here is because when Ted Cruz says yes, Chuck Todd says, "You do," you'll see his like eyes widen, and if you listen carefully, I don't know who, there's like laughter in the background. That I listened to it multiple times. I don't know who's laughing, if it's like Chuck Todd's panel, which side of the conversation, but there's definitely like laughter in the background when Chuck Todd says, "You do." And this is, remember I talked about how at the beginning of the live stream, I talked about how Trump in his July 25th phone call with Volodymyr Zelenskiy, the president of the Ukraine, asked him to investigate the Crowdstrike conspiracy theory that Ukraine hacked the DNC server, not Russia. And Ted Cruz he's not actually saying that he believes that when he talks to Chuck Todd here. He's coming up, there's like this after the fact justification that Republicans are coming up with, where they're saying, well, Ukraine meddled in our election because some Ukrainian officials thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, and they published op-eds that said that they wanted that were against Trump. That after Trump said that he thought that, well, maybe Russia should just keep the Crimea that they took through military action from the Ukraine, and of course, but that's not the same thing as like hacking materials and anonymously dumping them through WikiLeaks, as the Mueller report says that Russia did, or of course their whole like social media disinformation campaign that the Mueller report says Russia did. That's election interference. That's not Ukrainian officials writing op-eds. And I think Chuck Todd does an okay job of cross-examining Ted Cruz on that. And also Ted Cruz does this, speaking of laughter, that's sort of a theme of the live stream, I guess, Trump getting laughed out of Europe, this weird laugh at the beginning when off-camera laughter when Chuck Todd says, "You do believe Ukraine meddled?" And then Ted Cruz does that thing that Rudy Giuliani always laughs when his name is mentioned when he's introduced, which is really weird. Ted Cruz didn't do that, but he does this weird like laugh when he's asked a question that is really a damning question, to make it seem like, oh, no big deal, this question is laughable, your question is laughable, but just by laughing doesn't make the question laughable. And I think I've criticized this clip enough of Chuck Todd's interview with Ted Cruz, and I will talk about it with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Do you believe to serve on the board?
Do you believe Ukraine meddled in the American election in 2016?
I do, and I think there's considerable evidence.
You do? You do?
Yes,
look,
and Chuck, let me say,
this is, Senator, this sort of strikes me as odd, because you went through a primary campaign with this president. He launched a birtherism campaign against you. He went after your faith. He threatened to, quote, spill the beans about your wife about something. He pushed a National Enquirer story, which we now know he had a real relationship
Chuck,
with the editors
you're
of the National Enquirer.
dragging up all that garbage.
Senator,
that's very kind of you.
Let me ask you this. Is it not possible that this president is capable of creating a false narrative about somebody in order to help him politically?
Except that's not what happened. The president released the transcript of the phone call. You can read what was said on the phone call.
Yeah, and
let me point out again.
You yourself thought the Biden part was troubling.
Chuck, let me point out a game that the media is playing. A question that you've asked a number of people is you've said to senators sort of aghast, do you believe that Ukraine and not Russia interfered in the election? Now that in a court of law would be struck as a misleading question. Of course Russia interfered in our election. Nobody looking at the evidence disputes that.
But the president of the United States does.
Look, on the evidence, Russia clearly interfered in our election. But here's the game the media is playing. Because Russia interfered, the media pretends nobody else did. Ukraine blatantly interfered in our election. The sitting ambassador from Ukraine wrote an op-ed blasting Donald Trump during the election season.
Do you know why he did that?
That is unusual.
What did Donald Trump as a candidate say about Ukraine and Crimea during the election that might have inspired the ambassador?
So you're saying they had disagreements with Donald Trump and they wanted Hillary Clinton to get elected.
Okay, so they wrote an op-ed.
A Ukrainian parliamentarian.
That is the difference. What you're saying is you're saying a pickpocket, which essentially is a Hill op-ed, compared to Bernie Madoff and Vladimir Putin. You're trying to make them both seem equal. I don't understand that.
Chuck, I understand that you want to dismiss Ukrainian interference because A, they were trying to get Hillary Clinton elected, which is what the vast majority of the media wanted anyway, and B, it's inconvenient for the narrative. You know, it's hysterical. 2 years ago, there was article after article after article in the mainstream media about Ukrainian interference in the elections. But now the Democrats have no evidence of a crime, no evidence of violating the law. And so suddenly Ukrainian interference is treated as the media clutches their pearls. Oh, my goodness, you can't say that. Last week, Chuck, you called Senator John Kennedy basically a stooge for Putin.
I did not.
The press needs to stop being ridiculous, Senator, and acting like they work for Adam Schiff.
Okay, so did you get the briefing from...
So, I don't know, did you buy that line from Ted Cruz? Like I said, I pretty much pre-criticized that clip before I showed it. And you must have, if you listen carefully, you could have, I think you heard that off-camera laughter when Todd said, you do believe in that the theory that Ukraine meddled in our elections, and the idea, the one criticism I have what Chuck Todd said there that I didn't mention before I showed the clip is he said, you know, well, Ukrainian officials writing op-eds, that's like a pickpocket. That makes it sound like it's illegal, which it isn't, compared to like the Russian interference in our election, which, you know, that's, he said, Bernie Madoff, Vladimir Putin. Well, if you read the Mueller report and their indictments, I mean, like I said, I can't tell you whether all, because the evidence is classified. I haven't seen the evidence, but I've seen the indictment. I've read the Mueller report, which says that the GRU hacked the DNC server and then distributed it through some fake anonymous, like Guccifer, and then I can't remember the other one, and then anonymously through WikiLeaks, they disseminated the hack materials. That's what it says in the Mueller report. It doesn't, and that is, and the military units that did that were indicted. They're actual indictments, so that were made public. So that actually is a crime. Writing editorials, you know, Ukrainian officials writing op-eds critical of Trump for saying that Russia should keep Crimea, that's not illegal. There are no indictments for that. So that would be my criticism of Chuck Todd in that last clip, that he's, you know, they're pickpocket. Well, pickpocketing is illegal. Ukrainian officials, not so much. Anyway, I have a second Jerry Nadler clip I want to show you here, because this is when he's talking to Dana Bash on CNN State of the Union, where she specifically asks him about whether the evidence is rock solid. He actually responds to the rock solid. Just a little mistake on his part. He says it's lock solid, not rock solid. And then he says a jury would convict in 3 minutes. That, I think, is kind of an overstatement. I mean, I hope juries never can convict on anything in 3 minutes, as a former criminal defense attorney. But then he also answers this question that Jonathan Turley, the one Republican lawyer of the Constitutional Scholars this last week, one of his big points was, you know, you should wait for the courts, wait for the third branch to resolve the disputes between the two branches. And he brings up the U.S. Constitution. I have my Constitution here, of course, and I may refer to it and talk to you about it after we watch Jerry Nadler talking to Dana Bash about it at the end of this 2.5-minute clip that I will talk about with you after we watch it together here.
Ukrainians to announce that they were going to hold an investigation.
You feel comfortable that this whole thing was directed by the president himself? You feel that you have a rock-solid case?
We have a very rock-solid case. I think the case we have, if presented to a jury, would be a guilty verdict in about 3 minutes flat. And, you know, all this nonsense about hearsay evidence, there is considerable direct evidence, and it ill behooves a president or his partisans to say you don't have enough direct evidence when the reason we don't have even more direct evidence is the president has ordered everybody in the executive branch not to cooperate with Congress in the impeachment inquiry, something that is unprecedented in American history and is a contempt of Congress by itself. He has ordered everybody not to participate. And the only testimony we have are from public-spirited, patriotic people in the CIA, the Pentagon, the White House itself, who came forward and defied the president's orders and testified.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because we've been hearing a lot from you and your fellow Democrats about the fact that the White House is obstructing Congress by not handing over documents, not allowing key firsthand witnesses like Mick Mulvaney, like John Bolton, like Mike Pompeo to testify. But the founders, who we heard a lot about in your committee last week, set up a third co-equal branch of government, the courts, to resolve differences like this. But you have not even tried to go to the courts to compel these witnesses to testify. With something as grave and momentous as impeachment, why not?
Well, first of all, we have gone to the courts, and some of those cases
not on this issue.
We have gone to the courts, starting with McGahn and various other people.
Right, but not on Ukraine and on the impeachment inquiry.
And what we have found is that the courts take months and months. But we don't need to go to the courts. The Article I power, which is Congress's power, is the sole power to try impeachments, should not be and has never been dependent on the courts. The president and the executive branch are duty-bound to cooperate with Congress in any legitimate inquiry. And the president's absolute failure to do so and defiance is an act against the separation of powers, against the constitutional scheme, and shouldn't require anything from the courts. Now, the courts are a way to try to enforce this, but much too slow a way.
Well, you told CNN 1 month ago that you wanted to do this.
So that is Jerry Nadler's response to why they don't have to wait for the courts. And there is actually some, if you take out your Constitution, this is my ACLU Constitution that I send out to people who actually, all you have to do is at the $10 level, I give out the Constitutions. You don't even need the Impeach Trump t-shirt. It's like, yeah, that's right. It's at the $5 level, you get one of these hashtag LiberalViewer stickers. This is on Patreon. It's a little different at the join button on YouTube. At the $10 level, you get the sticker and the Constitution. And at the $15 level on Patreon, you get the Impeach Trump t-shirt, at least for this Sunday and next Sunday, while supplies last. But in the Constitution, if you look at Article 1, Section 2, and you go all the way to the end of that for the House of Representatives, it says, it says the House of Representatives shall choose their Speaker and other officers and shall have the sole power of impeachment. So impeachment is its own thing, and the House has the power. Of course, he said try impeachments. That's the Senate. If you go to Section 3 of Article 1, Clause 6 here, it says, the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. When sitting for that purpose, they shall be on oath or affirmation. When the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside, and no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. So it might not be 67. It depends on how many senators show up, but it's 2/3 of the senators who show up. If all 100 are there, then 67 senators to convict the president. Chief Justice presides, and like Jerry Nadler said, that's a whole separate congressional power that they don't even have to go to the third branch. Though, I mean, I would like to see how some of these cases turn out, and I wish they would pursue them, because the courts might even come up with decisions on them, including the Supreme Court, before the 2020 election. But anyway, I want to move on to two more newsmaker clips. One Democrat and one Republican, both from ABC. Because I thought ABC did a good job of sort of juxtaposing Zoe Lofgren from the Bay Area here in California, who has participated in all three of the modern day impeachments now, the Nixon impeachment, the Clinton impeachment, and the Trump impeachment, which you'll see George Stephanopoulos refers to, and then asks her to give like a concise argument for why she says that this impeachment is worse than even the Nixon impeachment. And Zoe Lofgren, well, if you were watching last week, I had a Zoe Lofgren clip where she said the same thing, but I think she says it well, and she has the gravitas to make this statement, and so I will talk about that a little more with you after we watch Zoe Lofgren's explanation why Trump is even worse than Nixon over here.
Lofgren, let me begin with you. You've played a role in every modern impeachment. We're going to show our viewers some of that evidence right there. You were on the staff of the House Judiciary Committee during the Nixon impeachment back in 1973, a member of that committee for Bill Clinton's impeachment in 1998, and the impeachment of President Trump today. But it appears that at least half the country is unconvinced by your contention that the allegations against President Trump are more serious than the charges against Nixon and Clinton. Make the concise version of that case.
Well, in the Nixon case, he used presidential powers to influence improperly the election. He covered it up using the FBI, the CIA. He abused his power and was voted articles of impeachment as a consequence. In the case of President Trump, not only has he abused his power to improperly put his thumb on the scale for the election, he used a foreign power to do it, and that is really hits all of the buttons that the founding fathers were concerned about.
But as you know, the Republicans have made the case that the president didn't get what he wanted. He didn't get the investigation. The aid went through.
Well, the aid was suspended for a while. As a matter of fact, people died while it was suspended. But he did use that power to get that end, and it's not over. I mean, he is using agents to get improper things done, to try and tar his opponent. And Rudy Giuliani, his agent, is in Ukraine meeting with KGB-trained people today. This is an ongoing threat to the national security.
So I think that was a good argument from Zoe Lofgren that Nixon, all he did was try to burgle the Democratic headquarters in the Watergate Hotel, the whole burglar thing. So he tried to cheat on a U.S. election, but he didn't bring a foreign power in. Although actually there's this thing where Nixon tried to get Vietnam to delay the peace talks or something back in 1968, but that's a whole different kettle of fish that Zoe Lofgren, that didn't come up that came up later. And anyway, so maybe Nixon also did some, that's the thing, it's Trump has done so many bad things. If you read the Mueller report, there was a lot of obstruction of justice in there, and that's not, the whole immigration asylum issue and the kids in cages, the kids dying in custody. There was some kid that died of the flu in there's real cruelty going on in the Trump administration. There's so many bad things going on. That's, I've seen these two different arguments Republicans make. One is that Democrats have been trying to impeach Trump since he became president, the moment he was sworn in. And then they also say they're rushing to impeachment. And of course, those are two contradictory arguments. But Trump has done so many bad, atrocious assaults on the Constitution, assaults on norms and institutions of our American government, the checks and balances. Now he's totally stonewalling any congressional investigations completely. Not even just impeachment, just everything. It's really a travesty and a challenge for the entire American system. And it's even upsetting Sandy over there again, because I guess I'm getting too agitated, and that upsets Sandy. So maybe I should move on to the next and final clip that might agitate me, but Sandy won't be able to hear it. It's Matt Gaetz, a Trump true believer, will always be a defender of Trump. This is also from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos asking Matt Gaetz, is it okay with you for Trump to ask to hold up the aid for at least the Oval Office meeting, which there's like direct evidence from Gordon Sondland on that, and is it okay for a president to ask for foreign assistance and to investigate a rival? And you'll see Matt Gaetz totally rejects the premise as Trump is a corruption fighter. He really cared about corruption in Ukraine, and that's what this whole thing was about. It's a defense made up after the facts. If you read the transcript like Trump always says, of the July 25th phone call between President Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskiy, you won't see Trump say the word corruption. He talks about the whole Crowdstrike conspiracy theory where Ukraine hacked the DNC server, not Russia. And then he talks about investigating Joe Biden and Hunter Biden because I hear they're horrible. If you read the transcript, you'll see he doesn't mention corruption. But Matt Gaetz, after the fact, has decided he's going to defend his beloved President Donald Trump based on him being a big corruption fighter, because we know Trump is a big corruption fighter. Do you believe that? I don't believe that, but you can tell me what you think after we watch the final newsmaker clip for tonight over here.
Tough balance for the president.
Democrats are clearly making the case that they're going to say that the president abused his power by soliciting foreign interference in the election, by soliciting interference so that the investigation of Joe Biden, even your witness this week, even Professor Turley said that the president's phone call was not appropriate, was not perfect. Can you explain to the American people why you think it's okay for the president of the United States to ask a foreign nation to investigate a political opponent and withhold a White House meeting at the same time?
I reject the premise of the question, and that's what the president was doing. I think the president was acting on his sincere, longly held view and skepticism of foreign aid. I think he was acting on concern about Ukraine being the third most corrupt country in the world. And I think he was also reflecting specific concern about this Biden connection to Burisma. And remember, it was George Kent, a witness called by the Democrats, who came forward and said, we were so worried about Burisma that our own embassy had to pull out of a public-private partnership that they were engaged in. But what is so dizzying, George, is the evolving standard for impeachment from Democrats. Through most of 2019, Nancy Pelosi said she opposed impeachment, not because the Mueller facts weren't strong enough in her view, but because it wasn't bipartisan. She set the standard of bipartisanship for impeachment. The only thing that's changed now is that we're moving into an election year, and she's willing to pursue a partisan impeachment. And you look back to 1998, Jerry Nadler, our chairman, was saying that it was ripping votes asunder to pursue a partisan impeachment, and no impeachment would be legitimate if it was primarily supported by one party and opposed by another. This impeachment is exclusively supported by Democrats in Congress. It's not just that Democrats can't persuade people like me who support the president. They can't even persuade Republicans like Will Hurd, who are critics of the president, to support this impeachment. So they continue to move the goalposts. And my friend Zoe Lofgren, one of the nicest people in Congress, she compared the impeachment in 1998 to fascism, George. Fascism. Now, I don't think that history looks kindly on the 1998 impeachment, and I certainly don't think it will look kindly on the inevitable impeachment of the president today.
Congressman Gaetz, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
So you can't say I didn't show the Republican perspective, but do you buy that? Do you buy what Matt Gaetz just said there? That I pretty much pre-criticized his comment there, but I showed you Matt Gaetz, I showed you Ted Cruz, but I also showed you Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, and Zoe Lofgren. So I report, you decide. That used to be a Fox News slogan. I don't think they even use that anymore. But anyway, that was the last news clip. I think if you've been paying attention, you know why Trump is going to get impeached before Christmas, why the House Judiciary Committee is going to vote out articles of impeachment this week. Why Impeach Trump is on my shirt while I talk to you. It's because he held up aid to the Ukraine, held up an Oval Office meeting. He asked the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskiy, to do us a favor, though, to investigate this Crowdstrike conspiracy theory and Joe and Hunter Biden, because I hear they're horrible. And that's what this is all about, and all the evidence is there, and we'll see what happens when it goes to the Senate for a trial. That seems to be unlikely to result in removal, but who knows what extra evidence will come out when John Roberts is the Chief Justice presiding, and maybe there are a few Republican senators who might, be looking at an election where they have to tell their voters that they acted in a fair way. Susan Collins, Susan Collins from Maine, Cory Gardner from Colorado, Mitt Romney from Utah. All you need is like 3 Republicans, and then you have 50 votes. And then John Roberts as Chief Justice has to break the tie. I don't know. It wouldn't be Mike Pence. Or maybe it would be Mike Pence. I don't know exactly how that works. But anyway, that's what we have to look forward to in January, because you saw in the news summary from NBC News Meet the Press that Mitch McConnell has put out the schedule for the Senate in 2020, and January is missing, which presumably means he's putting aside a month for the impeachment trial, where who knows what will happen. But anyway, before I finish my live stream, first I want to thank my Super Chat contributors, and of course G Wolf, who became my second YouTube channel membership before I even started my live stream. I have that's by clicking that join button down below the video. I don't know why. Let me try again. Oh, I think I put it on the wrong level. That's what. Let me try it. Oop. I was trying to import this, but I put it in like a whole different. This is like, okay, let me put it over here.
It's a tough balance for the president.
Democrats are clearly making.
I don't know why that went back to Matt Gaetz, but thanks G Wolf, Giselda, and Lulu Girl for the contributions that show up there, and also for the Dash and Sandy fans. Wait, hold on one second. Also for the, did I say Griselda for the $4.99, and Lulu Girl for the $4.99, and G Wolf for the being a new member. And then for the Dash and Sandy fans out there, I been complaining all during the broadcast that Sandy was agitated. Actually, she's sleeping over there now, but sleeping is one of the things Sandy does a lot of. There, you'll hear some Sandy snoring, and then Dash going to the door. Sandy snore, Dash to the door. In this final clip, the Dash and... Wait, that's not it. The Dash and Sandy clip for the Dash and Sandy fans out there before I finish over here. And that's the Dash and Sandy clip for the Dash and Sandy fans. Hope you enjoyed that. I may do a bonus live stream if they vote out articles of impeachment, or maybe when it comes to the floor of the House. Would it be next week or the week after? I don't know exactly how that's going to work out. I've been hoping to do some extra live streams to cover some of the impeachment. I'll definitely do that in January when the impeachment trial starts in the Senate. But anyway, until something like that happens, or I do one of the edited, produced videos I've been hoping to do when I have extra time. Actually, I have a whole bunch of ACLU related work to do this week. So, although, of course, everything I say here is my own opinion, and the ACLU, of course, has no position on the impeachment of Donald Trump. So don't in any way. Well, I think I made that clear. And anyway, I guess until I have some reason to upload some edited, produced video or do a bonus live stream, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.